And hello, everybody. I'm David Schuster in Lebanon, Connecticut. And what a night this has been. Dueling debate town halls between President Trump and Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. Biden was on ABC, Trump was on NBC. What I'd like to do over the next little while is take you through where I saw the news that was made tonight. Also play some clips that will highlight some of the differences, and then answer your questions, both about the town halls and about some of the latest data and trends in this race with just 19 days until November the 3rd. First, the news that was made out of tonight. Trump, well, the news, I think, for most people is going to be largely stylistic. President Trump faced a very sort of combative, adversarial sort of town hall led by Savannah Guthrie, who grilled him for the first 20 minutes. Joe Biden was much more sort of matter of the fact, calm, was able to sort of keep his voice sort of quiet. So for people who are looking for clear stylistic differences, you will see the headlines about a combative, feisty Donald Trump and perhaps a more calm and cool Joe Biden. As far as the news that was made tonight, President Trump did denounce white supremacists, although we're going to play the clip for you in just a moment because he managed, I think, to put the media back on its heels a little bit, may have fired up his own base about media bias with how he handled this. The president said that he would accept the election results if he loses. And he also said that he is he also said that the $750 tax filing fee was likely taxes that he paid was likely just a filing fee, that he had other taxes that he paid. We'll get into that. As far as Joe Biden, the news that was made at his town hall at ABC is that Joe Biden came out and said it was a mistake for him to support the 1994 crime bill because of the incarceration rates and how much it locked up African Americans as a percentage compared to white Americans and prisoners. Vice President Biden also was fairly sort of temperate in that he was asked about his tax reform policy and said whether he would do it on the very beginning. And he said, look, I need to go out and get the votes, offering a very sort of pragmatic approach to his town hall, suggesting that he's going to have to work with the other side to make sure he gets all the votes that he needs to be able to do this. But let's get right into some of the sound. Here's the sound that struck me as so sort of interesting right off the bat in terms of President Trump and sort of the combative sort of nature of what he faced tonight. Here he is taking on questions from Savannah Guthrie about white supremacy. Watch. My God. God. All right, so there you go. There it was from Savannah Guthrie. Peter Bittner on Haps is asking me what was the most surprising thing that I saw in the debate. And the thing that surprised me the most was just how aggressive Savannah Guthrie was right off of the start. Now, it cuts two ways. I think it clearly rattled Donald Trump, and I think it made him a little bit sort of more anxious and agitated. And that wasn't necessarily the kind of sort of warm, he has got it all together, sort of calm persona that he wants to try to project, less, just over 2 weeks until the election. On the other hand, there is a benefit to Donald Trump with how hard Savannah Guthrie came after him. And that is Donald Trump, I think, did a pretty good job of denouncing white supremacists and making the argument that, without having to say it so clearly, making his argument that the media is biased against them because of how they handled this question and how they brought up the issue of white supremacy, and also how they have handled Joe Biden in the past about Antifa. So if I was scoring this, I would say, good for Savannah Guthrie. She was very aggressive, and certainly this was great television. But I think that there's also some rallying here of Donald Trump's base that he was able to get by leveraging this and turning it right back, and suggesting that the media was biased. Now, in terms of the tone, let's compare the tone that Savannah Guthrie was giving Donald Trump with what George Stephanopoulos was giving Joe Biden over on ABC. Let me pull up this clip, and this is where Biden is asked about whether or not he would take a COVID-19 vaccine. And very early, instead of the George Stephanopoulos spending the first 15 or 20 minutes essentially yelling at Joe Biden, the way Savannah Guthrie at times seemed to be yelling at Donald Trump, George Stephanopoulos very quickly turned the questioning over to people in the town hall, including the first question from a Republican. Here it is. Watch. All right, so I want to cut it off there because there was a lot of interesting stuff there to pull apart. First of all, you notice, I mean, George Stephanopoulos, he interrupted also and asked some pretty, tough follow-up questions. Would you mandate a mask? But Joe Biden, instead of being defensive and agitated about it, was just sort of matter of fact. And at one point agreed with George Stephanopoulos that no, you can't mandate the mask, which is interesting because at one point, a couple months ago during the campaign, Joe Biden seemed to suggest he was in favor of a mask mandate. So, just in terms of tonal quality tonight, what jumped out to me, and we're already getting a lot of questions from folks who are, who are joining the live chats through Twitter, through Haps TV, which we're broadcasting live. This is a special edition of Quick Hits News, and we're talking about the dueling town halls tonight between Joe Biden, who was on ABC with George Stephanopoulos, President Trump, who was on the NBC town hall with Savannah Guthrie, and other, of course, people who asked questions. And again, the takeaway, I think, is going to be that people will see Donald Trump as very combative, very feisty, which does rally his base, particularly those who feel that the media is biased against him. Trump did score some points in underscoring that he thinks that the media is not fair to him, and that seems to be something that fires up his supporters. On the other hand, for people who are looking for a more calm, reasoned, matter-of-fact approach, Joe Biden delivered that in spades. Now, I'm already getting a lot of questions from folks. Which was better television? To me, and I think the ratings are going to bear this out, the better television was, of course, Donald Trump on NBC. Because when you have somebody who is combative, when you have a clash, that always makes better television than a thoughtful discussion on the policy issues and sort of a little give and take and people being willing to compromise. The question is, are people looking right now for great television, or are they looking for a president who is going to be perhaps more thoughtful and more reasoned and more matter of fact? And so what's going to happen, I'm sure, is I think a lot of people tomorrow are going to say, wait a second, NBC got much higher ratings than ABC. And that won't surprise me, but I wouldn't read into that somehow Donald Trump has more support. I think people watch television for a very different reason than they might actually go into a voting booth and decide who they want to be the next president of the United States. Now, I'm going to ask a couple of people. A couple of people have asked questions already. I want to say thanks, of course, to some of the folks, and I'm going to put on my glasses here so I can see who's on the chat. Sushi, Sean, Mark. Let's see. Good to have all of you on board on Haps TV. One of you asked a question about, well, what was my view about NBC actually inviting Donald Trump to have this town hall, given that this was supposed to be a debate night? And my reaction was that I thought this was very bad. Bad for the media, bad for politics in general. And the reason is because, yes, they were supposed to have a presidential debate, town hall style format in Miami tonight. The presidential commission said, no, we're only going to have it virtually because of Donald Trump's COVID-19 positive test a week and a half ago. President Trump said, no, I'm not going to participate virtually. And so the debate was off. And ABC then says, all right, well, Joe Biden, we're going to give you a platform anyway for a town hall debate. NBC, which is their right, says, okay, well, we're going to give one to Donald Trump. The problem that I have is that I think it was a big mistake, and it looked bad for NBC to schedule their town hall at the exact same time in the 8 o'clock hour. So that was forcing people to have to choose. If I were in charge of NBC, I would have put the town hall either before Joe Biden's town hall or after, or make it tomorrow night and give Donald Trump the same platform. But I just think it was this. None of us were served by having to flip back and forth if you wanted to watch both, or having to watch clips or excerpts instead of having the opportunity, each of us, to immerse ourselves completely in the town halls. That was impossible. And by the way, I did see a clip tonight in which somebody played the two town halls next to each other. That was a stark reminder of the first presidential debate, which drove all of us crazy and people talking over each other. It's impossible to do. Thankfully, because of the internet, we can see clips and we don't have to watch in real time. But in any case, I think it was a mistake. I don't think our politics were well served by tonight in terms of what the media did. However, I do think it was illuminating for people who tuned in. You got clear stylistic and policy differences between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And that, of course, is very important as we try to figure out, for the people who are undecided, where they're going to go with this election. I want to play one more clip before we get to some more of your questions. And I appreciate the 81 people who are chatting live with us now over Haps TV and Quick Hits News, through Twitter, through Periscope, and all the rest. There was another moment that was kind of strange, and we mentioned Donald Trump's COVID-19 test. It came the Thursday after the Tuesday night debate that Donald Trump had, the first debate with Joe Biden. And Savannah Guthrie pressed Donald Trump as to when he got that we know that he got his first positive test on that Thursday, but when did he get his negative test? And again, this gets right to the grilling and the combativeness that people saw at the beginning of the NBC town hall. Let me lose the Donald Trump picture here and lose the Joe Biden picture. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put up, here Here's the clip of Savannah Guthrie pressing Donald Trump on his COVID-19 test the week of the first presidential debate. Watch. Donald Trump, and I'm going to lose a picture here of Joe Biden, just so that we have a little more space on the screen, because I want to show you something that I love to look at, and I could look at this all the time. You're looking at the election map from 2016. This is the red states that Donald Trump won, the blue states that Hillary Clinton won. The reason this is significant is because if you look at red state after red state, Florida, Arizona, North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, all of the polls in those battleground states, and again, these are all states Donald Trump won, Pennsylvania, they all show that Joe Biden is ahead, sometimes by as many as 9 or 10 points. So the electoral map is intriguing to look at because Donald Trump, again, needs to essentially run the table in a lot of these states and keep most of the states that he won in 2016 and essentially defy all of the polling. Now, there was an interesting question that's come up from a couple of people, and again, thanks to all of you who are part of the live chat tonight about, well, you said a couple of nights ago that there's a Democratic wave, a blue tsunami that's coming. Is it possible that the polling is wrong? And the argument goes like this, that even though, and I mentioned the other night, that if you account for the error of the pollsters 4 years ago, and you factor that in, you subtract it from Joe Biden, he still gets more than 300 electoral votes. But the reason some people on the right believe that the polling is still wrong, and wrong even greater to an extent than they were 4 years ago, is because they note that the Republicans have done a better job than Democrats in registering new voters in states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Florida. They also note that Joe Biden's share of African Americans and share of Latinos is not as strong as Hillary Clinton's was 4 years ago, and that Donald Trump is making slight inroads among African Americans and slight inroads among Latinos. And by that argument, therefore, well, Donald Trump is going to surprise a lot of people, and the pollsters have it wrong, and their data sets and their modeling is wrong. The problem with that is that, yes, it's true, Donald Trump is doing slightly better than 4 years ago among African Americans and Latinos. But the problem is that he's doing much worse among another key voting bloc, and that is suburban women. And among suburban women, he's about 15 to 20 points behind where he was in 2016. So look, you can cut the argument all sorts of different ways. There's also an argument about, well, maybe he could still get all these undecideds here at the end. The problem is there are fewer undecideds 19 days before this election than if you look at the number of undecideds based on the polling 4 years ago, 19 days before the election. So again, I maintain that I don't think this is going to be a long, drawn-out election. I maintain that I think on election night, Joe Biden will be declared the 46th president of the United States, that he will be declared the winner over Donald Trump, and that it will be a relatively early night, perhaps in the 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock hour, and it'll be maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning when we find out that the Democrats have also taken control of the U.S. Senate with at least a net pickup of 4 Senate seats. However, I do respect the argument that maybe the pollsters are wrong, and I think nothing in this day and age should surprise us, because pollsters are trying to figure all of this out with a model that we've never had before, and that is, how do you account for a pandemic when a lot of people who might otherwise participate are deciding not to participate, or voting early, or voting by mail. And so it becomes a little bit more difficult. And the way you get a poll that's accurate is when a pollster can figure out exactly the demographics of everybody who's going to show up on election day. I think that's hard to do. I don't think it's impossible, but I think it's hard. Now let's get to some more of your questions. Let's have Biden does not look healthy is the issue. Okay, we addressed that. I think he was fine. Biden can't handle questions under pressure, but he wasn't under pressure like Trump was. Well, look, I think he can handle questions under pressure, but you get to a key point, that key takeaway from the town halls tonight, and that is, yes, Donald Trump faced a much more adversarial rat-tat-tat firing of questions from Savannah Guthrie for the first 15 or 20 minutes than Joe Biden faced from George Stephanopoulos and some of the town hall participants over on ABC. Again, with the Joe Biden town hall, it was a little bit more serene. He spoke in a softer voice. There were, some tough questions, but it wasn't constant interruptions. It wasn't sort of a defensive, combative event like it was at NBC. So I think a lot of people say, well, this is going to come across as, Donald Trump faced more scrutiny tonight than Joe Biden, and I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that argument. Is our country? I don't understand that one. This guy, don't dump Trump, so Republicans have to go back to being closet racists. Okay, thanks, Nicholas, for that. Let's get some more questions here. Does David Schuster read this chat, or am I dumb? Tomosa Aladomo. Yes, I read the chat, so you, sir, are dumb. No, you're not dumb. It's a valid question to ask. Here's the secret with all this, Tommaso, and that is when I don't have my glasses on, like right now, I just see a blur in terms of the live chats, and I know there's a system for making the chats larger, and great guys at Haps explained it to me the other day, and I've forgotten it. But when I put on my glasses, I can actually see the live chat. The problem with my glasses is I have this light here, and it gives me these sort of weird shadows, like I have some sort of antlers coming out or very extremely large eyebrows. So anyway, I go back and forth between the glasses and the not glasses. But I'm going to keep the glasses on so I can read some more of these questions here that we got. Up to 160 live chats. And again, look, if somebody's got questions about, you want a particular, what is this map that I'm looking at? Says the Terminator. And Renegade responds, this is the 2016 map. Yes, I was just saying a moment ago. This map explains the red states are the Trump states that he won in 2016. Blue states are the Hillary Clinton states. Donald Trump won 306 electoral votes. And that means he can afford to lose, a couple of the red states and still get the 270 he needs. The problem is, as we've been mentioning in the polling, that Donald Trump is losing at least by 5 or 6 points in Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Florida, Arizona, North Carolina, states that he won 4 years ago against Hillary Clinton. So that's why this, and you're going to see a lot of these maps over the next 2.5 weeks, I promise. Scared me for a second, said the Terminator. Okay, gotcha. Can the Dems overcome the GOP voter suppression and election fraud? That's a good question. And the fact of the matter is that it is a very different election when people have to either vote early or do mail-in ballots, and people are afraid of standing in line because of COVID and the pandemic. And also, it is a fact that in urban areas, for the most part, not always, but in a lot of urban areas, there are fewer voting locations, fewer precincts where you can go to vote than in a lot of suburban areas. In other words, you tend to wait on longer lines if you're in a bigger city than if you're in the suburbs or the exurbs. And bigger cities tend to be more minorities, African American, more diverse, tend to be more democratic. So you tend to make this argument, and I think there's some logic to it, that it's more difficult generally for the Democratic base to show up and vote than it is for the Republican base. Is that fair? That's a whole other debate. But Mr. Schuster, why don't you talk more about the electoral reform that is required to make elections more fair, campaign finance, no more corporate contributions, eliminate PACs, contiguous boundaries for electoral districts, no more gerrymandering? That is Rosanna Dana. Rosanna, I'm so glad that you asked this question. Because one of the things that, on our Quick Hits news show that we do each day, we do a lot of international news. And one of the things we get constantly from people overseas is, how is it that the United States of America has such a screwed up election system? Never mind the long campaign and all the money that sloshes around our campaign finance system, which, again, I think our campaign finance system is corrupt. I think it gives a lot more power to corporations and the wealthy than it gives to ordinary Americans. That's a whole other issue. But in terms of the actual election itself, the idea that we have 50 different state elections and election laws. In other words, each state does their own election, and we have different protocols, different procedures, different ways that you have to register. It's confusing. In addition, you have a different percentage in terms of the number of people that require for a precinct, the way that the votes are tabulated and counted. For example, Pennsylvania, they count the early votes before Election Day, so that on Election Day you will actually see them take all the early votes and add them to the totals with the votes that are coming in from all the precincts. Some states don't count the early votes or the mail-in ballots until after the people who have shown up at the precincts to vote, which in other words means that Pennsylvania, you're going to get a far more accurate count much faster than you might in other states. Why is that? Lord only knows. It's because each state has their own sort of set of rules, and because of the way our Constitution works and federalism and on and on and on, each state is entitled to conduct elections themselves. But we do have this system where we have so many different types of election systems, it's complete chaos, and when people have to wait long lines. Why don't we have a federal holiday for elections? We should, in my view. I think that would be a lot easier rather than people having to, take the day off and vote. So I'm going to lose myself here just for a second because I'm going to. Sorry, got to get rid of the Lester Holt promo there at the end. That was actually, I think, a lot of people, and we got a lot of people commenting saying, Trump is weak. It's always somebody else's fault. Moss is somebody. But I actually think that was a pretty good moment for Donald Trump there, simply because he's able to make the argument, hey, the media is unfair. You're asking these questions of me. What about the questions you should have been asking Joe Biden about Antifa? Of course, you're starting to white supremacist. I've denounced it. I have a career of doing so. I think that was probably as combative and feisty as it was, and that may not have been where Donald Trump necessarily wanted this town hall to go. But it does get to something that certainly fires up Republicans, that there is this perception in great swaths of the United States that the media is unfair, that the media is biased, that the media is liberal. And whereas I think that, Savannah Guthrie was doing her job, there are a lot of people who are going to look at this exchange and say, Donald Trump knocked it out of the park. This was silly to even suggest that he's a white supremacist. Anybody who's ever worked with him knows that he's not racist. He doesn't support white supremacy. Maybe he misspoke at the first debate. But there goes the media. There you go again, trying to, start the debate and trying to cause trouble. This fires up Republicans. And I think this is where Democrats need to be kind of careful, because whereas a lot of Democrats will look at this exchange and say, well, and I'm going to put up the picture because we got, because a lot of Democrats may look at this exchange and come to the conclusion, oh, Donald Trump was defensive. Donald Trump was combative. He didn't really answer the question. He comes across as domineering and he's rude. The thing about it is that I think it's a mistake for Democrats to read into that exchange with just sort of Donald Trump's style, that it turns people off. Because the fact of the matter is, for a lot of Republicans, it actually energizes them, excites them to see the president sticking it back to the media, saying you're being unfair. So again, we live in such a polarized world that how we even view what the president of the United States says may depend on our political leanings or our personal viewpoints. And all of us could look at the same clip and come to very different conclusions, which is where I think polarization is right now. But I would be careful if I were Democrats and drawing too much into, oh, Donald Trump was combative. He turned off a lot of suburban women who don't like him. I think for all the suburban women who might be turned off by Donald Trump's combativeness, it wasn't necessarily as combative as the first debate. And oh, by the way, I think Donald Trump energized his base a lot tonight with the way he took on Savannah Guthrie and the way he did this town hall. Does the energy matter? I do think that there's a lot of energy against Donald Trump on the left, as evidenced by all these people who are showing up early to vote in record numbers. 17 million people have already voted in this election that shatters every record in U.S. history in terms of early voting. And granted, we didn't have early voting until, the last couple of decades. But nonetheless, there is a lot of energy, I'd say, on both sides. And I think that's why it makes this race so difficult to predict. I'm going to put up another picture here let's put up a picture of Donald Trump. And we'll get back to some more of your questions and take away the picture of Donald Trump and Savannah. A lot of questions about Savannah. And, I enjoyed Savannah when I was at NBC and MSNBC. I think she's terrific. Some people say she's not their cup of tea in the morning as far as news, what she does on the Today Show. Look, one thing about broadcasting is that we are all subjective. If you go to a bar and you look at somebody across the bar, your buddy may look at the same person and say, oh, I can't stand that person. You may think, wow, that person is actually kind of attractive. It's all subjective. Television news is the same way. I may like Savannah Guthrie, or I may like Lester Holt, or not like George Stephanopoulos, who actually I do like him. But it's all subjective, just because we are subjective human beings in terms of how we view people when we see them and when we hear their voices. I bet there are a lot of people out there who can't stand me. They're like, man, I can't believe I discovered David Schuster. Now my night is going to be terrible. Republicans depend on anger, says Ignition Now. Look, I think, there's a certain sort of anger that exists in both parties. Antifa, Ignition Now says, well, let's see, we just read a question from yours. One other thing about broadcasting, it is profit driven. I think it's your name. I forgot my glasses right. You are so right. This is profit driven, and this gets back to my point that I said earlier tonight about these town halls. I do think it was because of profit for NBC and ABC that they decided to have these town halls. If it wasn't profit driven, if we were concerned about the greater good, I think the networks would have figured out some way of getting together and say, okay, Donald Trump is available to have a town hall. Joe Biden's having a town hall. Let's bypass the Commission on Presidential Debates because they set some rules that we don't like. Let's see if the broadcast networks can figure out some way to have an extensive town hall where we bring the candidates together and we actually have this debate. That would have been that would have served us a lot better, I think, as a society, than actually having dueling town halls that were on at the same time, which made it impossible to watch both at the same time. Let's go to a couple more questions. We've been on a long time here, almost 40 minutes. Sheesh. Will we ever get past the two-party system? My answer to that is unconscious state. No, I don't think we'll get past the two-party system for a while. I think you're simply going to see the two parties change. The Democratic Party becoming more and more progressive, being represented by more and more sort of minorities, Latinos, African Americans, immigrants. The Republican Party, I think, has drifted a bit to the right, but at the same time, perhaps a little bit less libertarian than they were, say, 10 years ago. Let's get to some more questions. The silent majority are supporting Donald Trump, says Visitor 187. Look, I think that's the big question in this election, and we'll end with this. Is there a significant majority of voters, or not even majority of voters, are there enough voters in states like Florida, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Arizona, Texas, who are afraid to tell a pollster, yes, I'm a Donald Trump supporter, who feel like it's not very fashionable, it's not very cool to come out and sort of admit that you're part of the MAGA crowd, the Make America Great Again crowd, that, again, because Donald Trump is politically incorrect because of the crazy things that he says that we're not used to having a president say. And I mean crazy in terms of you don't have a president. We've never had a president like this. And for people who want a certain decorum in the commander-in-chief and the president of the United States, that's not Donald Trump. But there are a lot of people who may not view the presidency as an office where you require decorum, who want a leader who's going to go in and wreck things and be like a bull in a china shop and tear down all the institutions and all the standards and protocols that we've had in the past. To them, Donald Trump may be their answer because he's doing that. So again, I think the question that is going to be answered in 19 days is, are the pollsters wrong? Are there a significant number of people who are afraid to admit that they are Donald Trump supporters because maybe he's impolite, because they don't want to say it in mixed company? Donald Trump has much higher negatives than Joe Biden does. And that's one of the other things that's so different now compared to 2016. In 2016, Hillary Clinton's negatives were also exceptionally high. The reason that I don't think Donald Trump's going to be able to find all these voters a lot of conservatives think are out there is because I don't think people are undecided as much as they were 4 years ago at this point. I think most people have made up their minds. Town halls like tonight aren't going to make that much of a difference. I think they'll reinforce people's perceptions of both candidates on the policy, on the personality. And I just think that minds have been made up much sooner, and we are in unprecedented times. So to all 312 people who were part of our live chat tonight, watching us live on HAPS, thanks so much for being part of the conversation, for your questions. We'll keep doing this. HAPS is growing, and they're adding some new technologies and abilities to be able to play with video and photographs like what we've been doing tonight. I'll also encourage all of you to go to the Quick Hits News website or find Quick Hits News on YouTube. Sign up for our daily show that publishes each day about 5 o'clock, 4 or 5 journalists each day. We bat around the top 9 or 10 stories across the United States and around the world, not just Donald Trump, not just politics 24/7. We give you 15 minutes is all you need to get caught up on all the news around the world. And it's some extremely smart journalists, not pundits. They empty their notebooks based on facts and logic and their years of experience. That's how we do the news on Quick Hits News. If you discover us, as a lot of people have recently, everyone who's been discovering us loves what we're doing and thinks, oh my God, I can actually watch the news for 15 minutes and get caught up on everything happening across the United States and around the world and have it be fair and have it be factual. That's Quick Hits News. Anyway, to everybody who's been watching us tonight on this special broadcast studio of the Trump Town Hall and the Biden Town Hall, hope you've enjoyed the analysis and the interactivity that we've had tonight. I'm David Schuster, Lebanon, Connecticut. Thanks for watching.